I'm Sophie. I'm a second year law student studying at the ANU. Today I have the pleasure of chatting to Professor Jo Ford, who taught me torts last semester. This is the first part of a series called Ask an Academic. Thank you, Jo, for joining us.
Thanks, Sophie.
I guess my first question for today is, how did you come to be teaching torts at the ANU?
Well, I came to torts from a combination of directions, I guess. The intersections between torts, international law and human rights. So a number of kind of things that constitute torts, like a battery, could also be framed as a human rights violation. So torture is a battery when seen in the eyes of civil law and torts. It's also a human rights violation. False imprisonment, when framed as a human rights violation, is arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whatever it happens to be. So I came to torts not necessarily steeped in the tortsness of it, but from an interest in the overlap between torts and human rights, especially where we're dealing with human rights violations overseas involving multinational corporations, I guess. So that intersection of international law, business, human rights and torts, which is kind of quite a lot going on, I guess. That's really my primary sort of interest in it from a research perspective.
Wonderful. Well, I guess there's this common perception that lecturers get the same holidays as students. We've just come back from our mid-term break, so can you let us know what you did during yours?
Well, part of it was spent marking, and in the post-exam period. But yeah, I suppose it is a perception that we don't necessarily do more than teaching, but we do have a research life as an academic, or we try to. In my case, so my work related to what we've just been talking about, I guess. What was I doing this semester? Well, there's an inquiry at the moment in Australia, Senate inquiry into whether Australia should have a Modern Slavery Act, in other words, legislation to deal with the risk of human trafficking or forced labour in supply chains, Australian companies' supply chains overseas. How should Australia regulate that? After all, people who are involved in mass producing things or extracting things or catching tuna on boats off Thailand or what have you, they're employees of Australian companies. So if Coles buys tuna from a Thai fishing boat that uses forced labour, what issues of law does that raise in Australian law? They're not employees of Coles. They're not in Australian territory. But at the end of the day, the Australian consumer is buying tuna that might be tainted in a sense by the fact that it was produced using forced labour. So I'm working on a series of ideas about what is the best way to regulate human rights risks in companies' supply chains overseas.
That's really interesting. No, it does. So you're saying that there's a connection between law and everyday life and the clothes that we wear,
the tuna that you buy.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, if we knew more about where the products and services that we buy come from, the human and environmental conditions under which we're made, then that may or may not, there's a lot of research on the human behavioural side, but it may or may not affect the way that we go about purchasing and what have you. The question for law is, like, to what extent is this something, after all, a lot of the activities are taking place abroad, is this something that Australia needs to regulate? In what way? How should it do that? Through what areas of law? But there's an intersection between law and everyday life, because anything we might purchase, especially in the garment sector, but not only, it is possible that if you trace the supply chain back far enough, you'll find that the conditions under which that thing was made or procured or what have you are problematic from a human rights perspective, from a torts perspective.
Sounds like shopping's an onerous task.
Well, to my mind, I'm not a technical person, but I think there's a lot that could be done using technology, even just handheld technology, so that when you see a product, you can sort of swipe over it and get a sense, a story of where it's from, who made it, how it's come to be in front of you. But there's all these tensions between human rights standards, labour conditions, environmental conditions, and best price. So most consumers, most of the time, in most countries, go for price.
Well, I'd love to continue this chat further, perhaps over an ethical cup of coffee. But where else can we learn more about this? Do you teach any other courses or?
I do. I teach a master's course in business and human rights. It's a fully online 10-week course. So that's fun. It's actually running at the moment. And students interact through discussion forums and so on. Maybe turn that into an LLB elective or something like
definitely.
that. But yeah, so that's the other place where I teach.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Sophie.
And stay tuned for the next part of Ask an Academic.